Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It's Monday, March 14th, 2016, halfway through the month of March, almost. We have got lots and lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. Daniel is sitting in our control room, hand hovering over the telephone, ready to answer the call when you call in for your comments and questions on the air. A lot of stuff going on over the weekend. As you know, there's been tremendous violence at the Donald Trump rallies, which the media and his GOP opponents are all saying it's all Trump's fault. Really, Trump went out there and he just committed all that violence himself. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But the major incident that happened was at Dayton, Ohio, when a gentleman leapt the barricades and tried to get on the stage with Donald Trump. He was stopped by the Secret Service. The guy's name is Thomas DiMassimo. And the story was originally that he had a knife, and photos of his arrest or detention by the Secret Service show the Secret Service agent with a slash to the hand. Now they're saying he didn't have a knife, and he's already been released from jail. And he's the darling of media. He's all over the place. They've got him on CNN all over saying how he wants to be a martyr. And he wants to kill Donald Trump, and he thinks it's just a really great thing. And they're pushing that whole idea of crazed lone nut assassin ahead of taking Donald Trump out. Now, as it turns out, Thomas DiMassimo is a professional actor. Child actor, hasn't done much work lately, not counting Dayton. And he's even got a page over at the Internet Movie Database. Not as nice as mine, but he does have one. He's a paid actor. And apparently he's got a long history of being there for the media to take video of amazing demonstrations. And apparently he's this professional protester, and he's got this long history of anti-American demonstrations. He first came to national attention for holding a protest where students stepped on the American flag on the grounds of Ohio's Wright State University. And there's a video of him dragging the flag around, just fanning the flames of anger between people. Now, NBC is reporting that DiMassimo was charged with disorderly conduct and inducing a panic, both misdemeanors. But the guy's a paid actor. Maybe that's where the government gets all these crisis actors. They go out to the Internet Movie Database, they look for people who haven't actually worked as an actor in a long time and say, would you like to have an acting job again? And they say, yes, please, anything at all. All right, you're going to go in and shoot up a school. Now, obviously tomorrow we have a couple of key elections, winner-take-all states. Florida and Ohio are in the spotlight. Donald Trump is polling well ahead in Florida, winner-take-all state. The polls are all over the place in Ohio. It's basically neck and neck. And that Ohio has become the keystone to this effort to stop Donald Trump and force a brokered convention at which Mitt Romney will be presented as the candidate of choice by the GOP leadership so that he can roll over belly up for Hillary Clinton in November. And an indicator of that is that Mitt Romney is up in Ohio, stumping around with John Kasich, trying to rally the vote against that evil Donald Trump and his Death Star of Doom that's up there in orbit around the moon or something like that. Little reminder that John Kasich loves NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. He loves the Trans-Pacific Partnership. He supports Common Core, amnesty for illegals, and Hillary Clinton's proposed gun ban. He's a statist. No wonder they love him so much. And he's all for amnesty for the illegal immigrants, and he's out there saying how illegal immigrants are made in the image of the Lord. Let's see. Kasich has said things like, God bless illegal immigrants. They're a critical part of our society. Actually, they're not supposed to be. You know, for those that are here that have become law-abiding citizens, God bless them. Okay, what about the ones who came here and continued criminal actions? How about those, John? And John Kasich is out there saying, I couldn't imagine enforcing our current immigration laws. Well, they are the laws, John, and the job of the president is to enforce the laws, to execute the will of the Congress, not to just sit down there and decide, I'm not going to enforce this, I'm not going to enforce that. Now, Kasich's co-chair, one of the Illinois co-chairs of Kasich's presidential campaign, a guy by the name of Brady, came out with a flip remark about Donald Trump. You're going to have to take him out with a headshot. And people call him on that, saying, are you calling for assassination? He says, it's not literal. It's figurative, really. You know, we're all talking about killing Donald Trump, but you shouldn't take us seriously. And if something happens to Donald Trump, it's a crazed, lone nut assassin for whom we cannot be blamed, such as that out-of-work child actor who jumped the barricades in Dayton. Now, conservative pundit Michelle Fields filed a charge against one of Donald Trump's campaign managers, claiming that he had grabbed her and forcibly manhandled her, leading to bruises. And they were making a big stink of it over at Breitbart. Oh, see, Donald, the violence is coming from the Trump campaign. He grabbed Michelle Fields. Then a video surfaced of their interaction from a different angle, showing it never did happen. It was another let's get Donald Trump lie. And as a result, Michelle Fields and Ben Shapiro have been forced to resign from Breitbart, both of them saying Breitbart refused to back us up here. How dare they not back us up in our lies? And so now they have taken their departure from Breitbart. All right, we're going to grab ourselves, they still haven't identified themselves. Now then, who's behind this riot in Chicago that shut down the Trump rally? And first of all, this idea that this is all Bernie Sanders is nonsense. They planted people to scream Bernie Sanders, so that Donald Trump will attack Bernie Sanders and Bernie Sanders will attack Donald Trump. Who benefits from that? Hillary Rodham Clinton. Who is mayor of Chicago? Rahm Emanuel, who worked in the Clinton White House. See how it all works? Now, the corporate media and the GOP candidates are all saying this is all the fault of Trump. He's divisive. See, his rhetoric is bringing down all this violence. Well, I mean, look at all the rhetoric that, came out for Black Lives Matter and, the war on all these countries and everything. There's a lot of hate rhetoric out there. It's hardly Trump's sole dominion here. But it's already come out. MoveOn.org, which is heavily funded by George Soros, has already taken public credit. We did this. We put it together. We organized it, and we're going to keep on doing it. We're going to disrupt every Trump rally that we can with violence. Now, for those of you old enough to remember the history of Germany in World War II, that's how Adolf Hitler came to power, by sending his brown shirt squad to his opponent's political rallies and disrupting them with violence. It's Nazi tactics being deployed against Donald Trump, which is kind of weird because they're trying to smear him as being a Nazi at the same time. So apparently Jamal Green, a black activist and Bernie Sanders supporter, posted on Facebook last week before the rally, everyone get your tickets to this. We're all going in. Shut it down. This was an organized campaign. Groups from the local University of Illinois, Chicago, including members of the Black Student Union, gathered before the rally in a campus lecture hall to discuss plans on how to disrupt the rally. This was organized. It is not a grassroots expression. This is political machinations. All right, we're going to grab ourselves a phone call. Randy in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello.
Hello, you're on the air. Oh, hang on a second. Yeah, you're on the air. Randy, are you there?
Yes, sorry. You cut out for a minute.
I'm not sure what's going on with that. A lot of hacking going on in the network. What's on your mind? Actually, we're almost on the edge of a commercial here, so I'm probably going to have to take you through the commercial break. But go ahead and start saying what you wanted to say.
Yes, did you hear about Hillary Clinton's new endorsement?
No.
Yes, the Grand Dragon of the KKK in California has now switched his support from Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton.
I love it. I absolutely love it. All righty. Well, listen, that's good news out there, and thank you very much for the phone call, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm looking at the news coverage of this story out of California where Will Queeg, the KKK Grand Dragon in California, switches support from Trump to Hillary Clinton. And he's quoted as saying, we want Hillary Clinton to win. She's telling everybody one thing, but she has a hidden agenda. This doesn't pass the smell test. Somewhere down the road, Hillary's going to claim that she has proof that Donald Trump put this guy up to it to try and harm her, and she's going to play for sympathy. Oh, those dirty tricks they're playing on me. Make me the president, and blah, 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 blah. Speaking of dirty tricks, apparently somebody is putting out armbands, red armbands, Nazi-style armbands with Donald Trump's election logo on them. They're wearing them to the rallies and everything. And the Trump campaign is making it very clear those are not coming from their campaign. They're not authorized by the campaign. This is another dirty trick. And again, Hillary Clinton served on and was fired from the Watergate Committee. She got a high-level education in the dirty tricks used by Richard Nixon in his re-election campaign to engineer his race against George McGovern, who he was able to trounce. And Hillary is using all of those dirty tricks. There are sources saying that she was involved with Soros setting up all these riots in Chicago and trying to set it up so that Trump blames Sanders for the riots and Sanders fires back so that Trump and Sanders are fighting each other. Again, who does that benefit? Doesn't benefit Trump, doesn't benefit Sanders, it benefits Hillary Clinton. She's playing dirty, and she learned at the feet of a master. All right, we're going to go ahead and grab ourselves a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, it's really a sad day. I remember I called on March 3rd saying it's the end of any semblance of American democracy when they trotted out, what's his name from
Romney.
2012, Romney. But, Mike, you were absolutely spot on. When you put on the brown shirts, that's exactly what's going on. It's being funded by Hillary, and frankly, the billionaires, and I wouldn't doubt at all if the government didn't have a hand in this as well.
Well, I'm sure they probably did. I mean, the establishment is the establishment, and they want to stay the establishment, and Trump is a serious threat to that.
Yeah. They talk about killing Trump, the whole El Chapo thing about killing Trump. This guy is being canonized for threatening Trump and telling people he wants to kill him. I mean, they are really, this guy, Trump ain't going to make it. He ain't going to make it.
Well, that all depends on how good his security is. But I'll tell you this, if they assassinate Donald Trump, that could trigger a mass uprising of the American people, because we've had it up to here with our political leadership deciding for us who the candidates and politicians will be. That's not how America is supposed to work. We, the people, are supposed to choose our own leaders. That is the guiding principle of democracy.
Mike, did you read the Pat Buchanan story about the big meeting in Sea Island, Georgia?
Yes, I did. We reported on that on Friday. 54 private jets showed up there. A lot of global warming gases, not a peep from Al Gore.
All the owners are gathering to stop Trump. They don't want Sanders either, but he's small potatoes compared to stopping Trump. But we've got the Democrats with the superdelegates. We've got the Republicans completely disavowing their constituency. Then we have the rigged elections themselves, the voting booths, and so on. And then, now we have the brown shirts, and then we're going to have the Electoral College. It's a freaking joke. It's a joke. This is democracy. This is not any semblance of democracy.
No, it's a theater. It's a theater production. Trust us, you are still in control of your own country, and no, you're not. I mean, there was a study done recently saying 95% of the concerns of the average American are completely, totally ignored by government. They're not interested. You don't have enough money to buy their attention, especially since Citizens United, the government is for sale to the highest bidder, people like George Soros.
But Mike, it will never change from the inside. It will literally take us running at the White House and the government like it was Frankenstein's castle with torches and pitchforks and stuff like that. That's the only way this will ever change. Well,
I disagree. I think that the U.S. economic and political system is headed for a Soviet Union-style crash, and so I counsel patience and just sit back and let it happen. The indications are there. Just stop getting involved. Stop filling out the paperwork. Stop paying attention. Don't listen to anything the government and the corporate media have to say anymore, because first of all, it's not a legitimate government, and the corporate media always lies. Just ignore them and let them destroy themselves. I really do not want to see a violent revolution in this country, because the wrong people get killed in these things.
I don't either, Mike, but they'll just ignore it just like they ignore everything else.
All right, well, time will solve that mystery. I'd like to avoid a bloody revolution, but I recognize that one is entirely possible at this point.
Well, keep up the good work, Mike. I'll talk to you some other time.
All right, thank you very much. Now, story coming out of Ex-Republic TV. George Soros backed MoveOn.org, and they are raising funds and donating them for further disruption of Trump protests. This is brown shirt Nazi tactics. They're not even trying to hide it. They're out there taking credit. We did this. We stood up there. We thugs are going to tell you Americans who your candidates are. Don't you dare select your candidates for you. We will tell you. Now, there's an article out of RINF.com. Credible account says Hillary Clinton is behind the violent protesters at the Trump rallies. George Soros is writing the checks, and Hillary's people are directing the strategy, including the strategy of turning Trump and Sanders against each other. That's how desperate they are. I mean, it's really early in the election year for these kind of tactics to be coming out. It's going to be spectacular by the general election. Trump has a huge lead out in California, according to the latest poll. Trump has a huge lead down in Florida in the early voting. And again, the open issue is going to be Ohio, and that's where they're going to send in all the vote riggers in a desperate attempt to prevent Trump from getting enough delegates to avoid a brokered convention. Now, there's an interesting little video that came on out about how apparently a Black Lives Matter protester in the Chicago streets, following the announcement that Trump had canceled his rally, celebrated by firing the semi-automatic version of the MAC-10 assault weapon into the air several times. How did he get an assault weapon in Chicago? Isn't that town supposed to be the poster child for gun control in America? Now, tax records are showing George Soros funded the Ferguson riots with $33 million. He incited those riots. He supported them to keep them going day after day after day after day after day. Why is he not in jail for inciting violence? They got the paper trail. It's in his tax records. Story coming... Oh, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, brown shirts and also the Hitler youths. This is ridiculous. These people, anybody can see that these people are organized. They're funded by George Soros. And remember, George Soros was also behind the Ukraine.
Yes.
This is in conjunction with the State Department.
He's behind this flood of refugees into Europe. He's trying to basically personally finance, the New World Order, where we're all just blurred together into one mass of workers and taxpayers and soldiers permanently enslaved to a single global private central bank. That's what Soros wants. That's why you keep hearing them, they keep saying diversity, diversity, diversity. And this is why Angela Merkel lost 2 or 3 provinces over there. And it's going to get worse because these people, we see their agenda. Yeah, I'll bet Merkel's feeling culturally enriched right about now. It's sad, though, how these people who, and I just want to say, this is also a divide and conquer strategy. You got all these people, there's a certain group of people holding Bernie signs, but who benefits the most? Hillary, absolutely. I don't think those were real Bernie Sanders supporters. I think those were Hillary's people. And she's trying to trick Trump and Bernie Sanders into a mutually destructive mudslinging contest that'll make her look good because she'll be above it all. She knows all the dirty tricks. She studied from Richard Nixon's committee to reelect the president. She knows how the game is played and won, and cheated. Yep, and you said it yourself multiple times. Who benefits the most? And that's Hillary. And Mike, I want to talk about Syria real quick. Russia is not leaving. Their combat operations are over. They got the base in Tartus and Latakia. They're staying. They're not leaving. They're never leaving. No, they're pulling out the majority of their ground troops, and I think it's a smart thing for Putin to do because of the Geneva talks that are about to start. The fly in the ointment, of course, is Turkey, and we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. But this was a very smart thing for Putin to do because now he's pulling back. He's not going to be portrayed as the belligerent in there. And he's basically saying Syria belongs to Syria's government. Let's now move forward on the peace talks. And, of course, John Kerry is still out there saying Assad must go, and Damascus is saying absolutely not. So the situation is still very tense. I mean, Putin can send those troops back in at a moment's notice. This is a symbolic gesture, but it is an important one.
It's just a shame how the leaders, these so-called leaders we got of the world, could have done so much good. Instead, you got just an Anglo-American empire of chaos, and it's a disgrace.
Well, that's what they want for themselves because they make money off of that. You know, our leaders are out for themselves in their own pockets. I mean, we have a government that literally sells you dangerous, toxic products because it makes more money, forces you to have to go to the doctor. Now we're finding out that Flint, Michigan is not the only city where you have toxic water coming out of the faucets in your home. I mean, what does that tell you about a government that thinks that's acceptable? And now we're finding out that that mine spill disaster that the EPA triggered wasn't even an accident. They were out there deliberately trying to reduce the level of water in there, and it got out of their control. And their attitude is, hey, if we toxify the natural drinking water, then everybody's going to have to go to Nestle and all the other bottled water companies, and we'll make more money and more tax revenues that way.
Well, what gets me about Flint, Michigan is they blame the governor or so, but you got 70, 80, 100 years of rot because the country's got 100 years of rot. People just don't get that. There's 100 years of rot in this country, and it starts from Washington, D.C. because of collapsing infrastructure, because they're more interested in starting wars and looting.
Yes.
And that's what it's coming down to. Hey, Mike, does Washington, D.C. still have lead in the pipes? Because maybe that's why they're so insane.
Well, I've often wondered that myself. Now, you need to be careful. You can have lead pipes that are safe as long as the water going through those pipes is not corrosive and not going to leach the lead out. The problem was when Flint, Michigan disconnected from the Detroit water system and went to the river, they were sucking in all these industrial pollutants. And they tried to deal with the pollutants by putting a chemical in there which was itself corrosive and magnified the damage. All they were thinking about was the cheapest way to get the water out there so we can get the water bills paid, and they weren't thinking the long-term harm either to the people or the water system itself. I mean, they made a decision which is going to force some future administration to have to replace all of that water infrastructure. We've got broken water mains and aqueducts all over this country. A big part of California's drought has to do with broken water mains under cities like Los Angeles and cracks in the aqueduct that are dumping millions and millions of perfectly safe, usable water into areas that don't use it or don't need it, can't use it, going out into the desert, down into the ground, down into the earthquake fault system. The government has abandoned taking care of this country in their desire to build a new world order.
We got 100-year-old railroads that are collapsing. That's why you got all these train accidents. And not only that, but you got Obama giving $5 million to help with the water after the fact. But how much money did he give to the terrorists for arming them? $500 million times 3. So that's where the priorities are.
That's exactly right. The priorities there is winning the new world order and the American empire, and after that they'll come back and say, well, yeah, we'll give you a little money to fix the pipes. It's your problem to deal with. You just exist to give us money and wealth and new workers and new soldiers.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Okay, story coming out of southernfriedtruth.com. Is the Ted Cruz campaign finally imploding after the latest lies and attacks on Donald Trump? And could very well be. Cruz is in decline. And first, let's not lose sight of the fact. Ted Cruz does not qualify to be President of the United States of America under the Constitution. He is not a natural-born citizen. He was born in Canada. Both of his parents were Canadian citizens at the time of his birth. And for the first 12 years Ted Cruz was in the United States of America, he was an illegal immigrant. His parents didn't finally file the paperwork to make him a U.S. citizen until he needed a passport to go on a school trip. Now, yesterday we had a caller who called on in about how Ted Cruz was at this rally where there's this fire and brimstone preacher out there saying, we have to kill the gays, it's in the Bible, that's a blah, blah, blah. And then introduces Ted Cruz and he comes right on. And it's worth looking at this video because apparently right after it was all done, somebody asked Ted Cruz, why are you at this rally where the guy's out there talking about killing homosexuals? And Ted Cruz just shrugs and says, I have no idea what he's talking about. Which is nonsense. Ted Cruz was waiting in the wings for his introduction. And you need to take that video and just broadcast it everywhere. Now, John Kasich up in Ohio is the last stopgap to try and derail Trump's getting enough delegates to avoid a brokered convention. And apparently John Kasich took $588,000 from George Soros. Soros is the billionaire mastermind behind this rush to make us part of the New World Order and destroy our national sovereignty. Soros is, funding all these groups that are shoving refugees into Europe. He wants to destroy the European identity. Bringing in the illegal immigrants and refugees to the U.S. wants to destroy the American identity. He just wants to have the elite in their palaces, the Morlocks, and the rest of us are all going to be the Eloi. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and read the original novel of H.G. Wells' The Time Machine. It really is much better than the movies they made out of it. Sanders is now leading in Illinois and says he doesn't want the endorsement of Rahm Emanuel. And I think he's right. The way people in Chicago and Illinois feel about Emanuel, an endorsement from him is not going to be a plus. Now then. Getting on back to Hillary's email scandals, we're still going back and forth on this whole issue about if what she did was illegal and espionage, but you need to get past that and start looking at what the emails tell us has been going on all along. More about that when we come back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. Apparently, Monmouth University just conducted a poll and has discovered that the disruption of Trump's Chicago rally has improved his numbers. They've gone up. People are more likely to vote for Donald Trump now because they recognize the dirty tricks being played. They recognize the Nazi-style brown shirt tactics for what they are. So, sorry, George, for all the money you poured into that. It's blown back in your face here. Let's grab ourselves a phone call. Tom in Minnesota, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yeah, what you're saying there, it's probably true in the short run, but if they can shut down this free speech, he ought to be suing like the city of Chicago. But I like your graphic there with the Nazi brown shirts. It's a perfect comparison because they're nothing but street thugs. And what these street thugs ought to do is know a little bit about history, and I wonder if they've ever heard of the Night of Long Knives.
I was going to mention that. For all these people who are assisting Hillary Clinton in these dirty tricks, remember what happened to the brown shirts after Hitler seized power. He got rid of them. And in fact, if that's a little too far back for you, go back and look at Bill Clinton's presidency and how all of his close top fundraisers all died within 6 months of his taking office. This is how these things get done. This is the fate of the useful idiots that support tyrants. So if you're one of these brown shirt disruptors, you'd better study your history real close and make sure your life insurance is paid up.
Yeah. I have another thought, too, about I can solve the whole issue of election fraud. It's very simple. Get rid of the secret ballot and have them, if you want to publish it in the papers or go to some state site and see if your vote registered properly or not. Why do people think it has to be a secret ballot? And plus, I'd like to know who my neighbors are voting for and so I can talk to them.
Well, the reason for your ballot to be kept secret was to prevent retaliation by employees or your neighbors and friends, and I'm all in favor of that. But I think what we ought to do is have the results of the precinct made public and posted, and then have it a public record all the way up the chain so that people can look and see what's going on. Because most of the vote rigging these days takes place at the top levels, inside Voters News Service. But one thing we definitely need, though, is we need to go back to verifiable paper ballots. These electronic machines are designed to steal elections. And again, if you've not gone over there, blackboxvoting.org, run by a wonderful lady named Bev Harris. HBO did a documentary called Hacking Democracy that focused on Bev's activism and what they found and how easy it is for these electronic machines to steal elections. And they're not even trying to hide the vote fraud. We're getting reports from people who showed up to vote and somebody had voted in their name in the early vote by mail programs. Down in Texas, all the people who were trying to push a button for Trump and their votes kept jumping over to Rubio. This is the crookedest election in U.S. history, and they're not even trying to hide it anymore.
Any retaliation, I think, though, could be handled through lawsuits. So, and again, once enough penalties are handed out.
That depends on finding judges who are going to be honest enforcers of the laws rather than simply tools by the establishment to keep the establishment in power. And as an illustration of that, I would say look at Larry Klayman's RICO lawsuit against the Clinton Foundation. He had a very strong case that foreign governments who were donors to Clinton's foundation got favorable treatment from Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Unfortunately, the case was assigned to a Clinton-appointed judge who just threw it out of court without comment.
Well, there's two things that can preserve a republic, and that's the most important person elected is a judge, and unfortunately that's the least people know about. And the second thing is people should understand what an informed jury is.
Well, that's an important thing, the fully informed jury. The reason the jury is there is as a last safeguard against corrupt judges, ambitious prosecutors, misapplied law. And judges don't want you to know that. Activists who are out there, trying to teach people their true authority and power as a juror are being harassed and arrested and beaten up. The judges and prosecutors just want the jury to be a rubber stamp. Well, let's save us all a bunch of time and get 12 store mannequins, dress them up and put them in the box, and have a little button that makes them nod their head every time the judge wants.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over. I actually don't have a name yet. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Les from Michigan.
Okay, well, what's on your mind?
Well, I was thinking, when they do go vote, I was thinking each person that votes should get a hard copy, like a receipt, and actually a couple of them, so that when the election does get done, and if there's any call for any shenanigans, all the people have to do is say, okay, well, here's mine. Here's my receipt. This is who I voted for.
Well, that would also be really good, and they could be identified with a randomly assigned number, something like, there's all kinds of ways to do that. There was actually a system that was devised called the True Vote system, and the way it worked is there was a machine, but it printed a paper ballot, and the paper ballot was on display behind a glass screen for you to look and make sure that what the paper ballot said was what you'd typed in. And if it wasn't, you could hit a button, and that paper ballot was destroyed, and you could start all over again. And then if you said, this is what I wanted, then the ballot would go into the box to be counted. But you had a paper record all the way from beginning to end, which is exactly what the establishment does not want. And my understanding is the guy who invented the True Vote system died under some very questionable circumstances. These electronic voting machines are designed to steal elections. One of the first companies that was into this field was the Diebold Company, which has a reputation for making bank automated teller machines that never lose a penny from one end of the country to the other. But Bev Harris and her researchers found there were at least 12 different ways the Diebold voting machines could be entered and the results changed without leaving any trace at all. That has to be by design. It has to be by design. And somewhere along the way, we're going to have to take sledgehammers to all those electronic voting machines because those are the instruments of the rise of tyranny.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if everybody did have hard copies, it'd be awfully difficult,
I'm sure there are ways to have an honest, accurate, and fair election system. Nobody in power wants them. We're the nation that put men on the moon. You're telling me we can't come up with an accurate, honest, fair, and verifiable election system? I don't believe that. If we don't have an accurate, fair, honest, and verifiable election system, it is because it is by design. Because those who are in power stole their way to power, and they want to keep on stealing their way to power.
Yeah, there was an old Mission Impossible show that did that too. It was some kind of banana republic where the guys went in there and reset the machine because the machine was set to vote for the dictator that was in place, and they actually reset it again so that it would go for the other guy. It was pretty good.
Well, there's a lot of that going on. The CIA has been doing election rigging in all kinds of countries around the world as part of this, let's kick out the government that won't do what we tell it to do and put in a puppet regime that will. And now they're just using those same tactics against we, the American people.
Yeah, they've been doing that kind of stuff for ages.
They have indeed. Anyway, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and I do want to get back to this. Looking at Hillary's emails, beyond the question of whether they're classified or not, or whether they were sold to a foreign power in exchange for donations to her foundation, we are finding confirmation that the agenda for the U.S. military intrusion into Libya had nothing to do about protecting the people from an evil dictator. That's just what they told you to get your money and your children. The agenda was all about money, banking, and blocking African economic independence. It was all about the gold dinar. It was all about Libya's state central bank. It was all about Libya's oil being sold only for the U.S. dollar. And Hillary's emails confirm that analysis. That's why they went in there. So there's a lot more in Hillary's emails than just the question of whether it was classified or not, or whether she was selling secrets to other countries. I still think that's a valid question to ask. Nobody wants to ask it. All righty. Now then, leaked audio has come on out of Hillary Clinton saying the Supreme Court is wrong on the Second Amendment. There should be no personal right to keep and bear arms. Only the government should have guns. Then everything will be just fine. I remember a country where that actually worked out. It was called Nazi Germany. Now, Bill Clinton got caught on videotape promising voters that Hillary as president will make all state college free. That's nonsense. The president doesn't have that kind of authority. We don't have that kind of money. They're just out there saying whatever they think is going to get people to push to the Hillary button, and once the Hillary button is pushed, they have no further use for you and no further obligation. When we come on back, we're going to be talking about this explosion in Ankara, reeks of false flag attack to justify Turkey's attack into Iraq. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And before we take this phone call, a sharp-eyed reader just spotted in the Chicago Craigslist an ad for paid positions to go disrupt political rallies. Salary plus health care plus benefits, full-time employment. This is all bought and paid for. This is not a genuine expression of grassroots rejection of Donald Trump. It's a rent-a-mob, is what it is. It's a rent-a-mob. All right, let's grab a phone call here from Scott in Virginia. Scott, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just wanted to talk to you about why some Democrats, I'm a former Democrat, might be voting for Trump. And there's a lot of positions he has that I don't like, especially on torture. I don't know how much of that's just talk, to try to sew up the far right wing. But I think this election, a lot of Democrats, the ones I talk to, they're not voting really for a president or for somebody to do something for them. They're voting for somebody to do something to the establishment.
Yes, I'm hearing that on the GOP side as well.
And here's the best example I could give to you is from a scene in a movie that Robert Shaw was in. Remember when he was in Jaws?
Yes.
And they brought him to the town meeting because they needed somebody to kill the shark. And you remember the expression on all the faces of the council people and the audience? They just were horrified by him.
Yes.
They didn't like how he talked. They didn't like how he looked, but they knew they needed him. They didn't care if he kicked his dog or yelled at his wife. They just needed somebody to kill the shark.
Yes.
And that's how I feel about Trump. I really don't I really don't want anything from him. I just want him to live up to his word and go after the establishment. And the more the GOP comes out against him, the better I feel about how I'm going to vote this year.
Well, I'm in agreement on that. I mean, that Monmouth University poll that we just reported in the last hour, Trump's numbers have actually been sent upward by that brown shirt attack in Chicago. It's backfired on them horribly because ordinary Americans, not the political class obviously, ordinary Americans still have a deep-seated sense of fair play and honesty in how these things are supposed to be done. Everybody gets their say. There's no censorship. Everyone gets equal time, and then the people make their choice. And they're seeing how the party machines and the corporate media are trying to take that away from us, and they're digging in their heels.
And if they're revealing what's behind the curtain.
Yes.
And I tell you, I've got Republican friends where it used to be for years we would not discuss politics because we'd end up in arguments. But now we're talking to each other, and because I feel screwed by Obama, and they feel screwed by having Mitt Romney foisted on them, and the way the party's going. And we really can talk now. We can talk in normal tone, not yelling at each other. And we're like, you know what? We're just unhappy with the whole thing, the whole establishment.
That's our common meeting ground, and every election cycle they try and split us up with these fringe issues like abortion and gay rights and the rest of it. But this election, all Americans are coming together in unity on this one issue. We can't go on the way it's been going on for the last 20 years. It is time for a significant paradigm change, structural change within the federal government. And this is probably our last chance to peacefully do it.
And I hope that when he wins, that we finally open up a discussion about 9/11 being a false flag and that our government was behind a lot of that. I hope we're mature enough and awake enough to go ahead and say, okay, this has been going on for centuries. Governments have been doing this to their own people.
Well, I'm in agreement with you. The people in power now will never do that. They're just, pathologically incapable of ever dealing with the truth. But if you really wanted to save this nation and put it back on the path to restoration, there does need to be a Truth and Reconciliation Committee where they're going to stand up and say, okay, these past administrations did lie to you, and we're going to tell you what was really going on all this time, coupled with our assurances that we are going to take steps. These kinds of things don't happen again. We have a ruling class that simply got used to the idea that they could do whatever they wanted and cover it up with any lies they wanted to the American people, and the American people now realize they're the most lied to people on the face of the earth. The degree of propaganda directed at us is far greater than anything that the Soviet Union or even Nazi Germany dished onto their own people. And it is absolutely overwhelming. And even the most diehard, I don't want to see it American patriot is having to blink twice and say, this nation has gone off its track. Something is horribly, horribly wrong. It's like that line in V for Vendetta saying, yeah, the guy in the mask was right. Something has gone horribly wrong with this nation. And we have to stand up and deal with it because ultimately it is our nation. That's why it says right at the top of the Constitution, we the people. We own this country. It is our nation and our government and ultimately our responsibility. And if the government we have allowed to act as caretaker of our national sovereignty isn't doing the job, we have a right to fire them and hire new government.
And I think there's a disease, if you want to call it a disease, that exists in our ruling class, that they don't see themselves, kind of like how people used to, I'm from Virginia, people used to identify more with Virginia 150 years ago than they did identifying with being a United States citizen. And nowadays, I think most of us more identify being a United States citizen than we do whatever state we're currently living in or
yes,
we're born in.
You're right.
But I think the ruling class, there's a ruling class out there that no longer identify as a United States American citizen. They identify being part of a global movement.
You're absolutely right. And they don't want us to identify as being Californian or Hawaiian or Georgian. In order to accomplish this New World Order goal, they have to destroy our sense of national, cultural, and regional identity so that they can blend us all together. Europe is showing it doesn't work. And this points to the failure at the heart of liberalism itself, where in point of fact, you cannot re-engineer the human mind by changing the outside environment. That's the prime belief of the liberals, and it goes back to Margaret Mead and Coming of Age in Samoa, which was a total intellectual hoax, and yet the entire liberal philosophical political establishment rests on that idea that we are born with absolutely blank minds and everything we think and feel is a result of the environment. And if they just tinker with the environment enough, we will all behave in predictable forms. And what's happening with the immigration crisis in Europe ought to tell you there's a serious flaw in that theory. The real world results are not matching the predictions. It's time to throw that prime assumption out.
And they are basically allowing an invasion.
Yes,
even though
they're encouraging it.
Yep. I don't think that these people are showing up with, weapons to invade, but they're invading by immigration. And I tell you what, they've gotten about to the point they can in this country with it. And I talk to liberal friends who say, well, these borders, this wall, we can't discriminate. And I said, listen, let's say we allow
ask your liberal friends, why is it bad for us to have a wall to keep Mexicans out, but okay for Netanyahu to have a wall to keep the Palestinians out of Palestine?
Well, here's what I tell them. I say, okay, let's say we agree that we're going to allow everybody who wants to immigrate to the United States to immigrate. Let's check them in. right? Let's fingerprint them. Let's ID them. Let's make sure that they're not, working for a drug cartel. In order to do that, you have to have a wall, right?
Yes.
So let's just take the immigration off the table. Let's say we're going to open up to everybody, but we're going to check them in. And they still won't agree to the wall then because their philosophy is inconsistent.
It doesn't have to be consistent. They're liberals. They're going on their gut, on their kishkas. They're sold on the jingoism and the faith that they serve a higher power, and as a result, their higher brain functions tend to be a little bit muddled, intentionally, by design. Anyway, listen, we got to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Scott, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, over the weekend, there was a gigantic explosion in Ankara. Death toll 34, supposedly a car bombing. And the Turkish government came on out and said they have strong indications the Kurds did this. Strong indications means they don't have any actual evidence. They just know who they want to blame for this. And Erdogan came on out vowing to bring terror to its knees. And not too surprisingly, they have uncorked on the Kurds in both Syria and Iraq. Turkish jets are pounding PKK camps in Iraq, which is an act of war against Iraq, by the way. But it's too convenient. The peace talks for Syria were due to start. And this comes along just in time to kick up the violence and derail any talk of peace there. And there are reasons to think this is yet another false flag because shortly after the explosion took place, the government of Turkey blocked social media. Facebook and Twitter were blocked because photos of the actual bombing scene were being sent on out, and there may be something there they don't want somebody to see. And even more compelling is an admission by the U.S. Embassy in Turkey that it was warned ahead of time about the terror attack in order to warn U.S. citizens and Turkish employees of the embassy to get to places of safety. So, story coming on out of Global Research up in Canada. Turkey invades Syria on the eve of Geneva peace talks. And they're talking about how Erdogan's dream of a new Ottoman Empire has been crumbling. And he's getting ready to hit the panic button. And he could ignite World War III. As I mentioned before, the peace talks are starting. John Kerry is out there saying Assad must go. And everybody else is saying no, Assad needs to stay. So the peace talks are going to go nowhere, and the U.S. is going to say, well, it's time for us to invade, especially since Putin has pulled his troops out. We can just walk on in and take over the place. I don't think so. They've been trying for going on 5 years to get Assad out. It hasn't happened yet. All right, let's grab ourselves some phone calls here. Mo in Florida. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you being my touch to reality.
Thank you.
I'm not crazy, right? My mother had me tested.
Well, good. Otherwise, they give you all kinds of pills. You know, I had some of those pills long ago, and I accidentally dropped one in the aquarium, and the fish were swimming sideways for 2 days.
Means you're not left or right, right?
So,
well, my question is, first of all, I think that, you know, the thing that to me says it all, and the people I've talked to, my friends, who are becoming less frequent and less in number. When you mention Building 7, just some of the smartest people, attorneys, real estate people, whatever, they didn't know. They still don't know there was a Building 7. And to me, that is the crux of the matter. What? Have you ever, other than the crazy NIST explanation, is this not the key to the whole thing? Because if Building 7 was pre-wired for demolition, which of course it was, then the whole thing was staged.
Of course the whole thing was staged. That's why the original official report on 9/11 didn't even mention Building 7. They were kind of hoping it would go away, and it hasn't. Latest polls being run by architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are showing that more and more Americans are now aware of Building 7 and its import to 9/11, collapsing into its own footprint the way that it does. And, again, we still have a segment of the population that absolutely doesn't want to know what this government has been doing, because then they have to face the choice, what are they going to do about it? And they don't want to face that choice. They just want to go on with, their lives of, just dealing with what they're dealing with, and they don't want to be troubled having to stand up to a corrupt and tyrannical government. But that number is a rapidly shrinking minority. And yeah, anytime any of you are talking with anybody about 9/11, just say, are you aware that there was a third building that came down into its own footprint without being struck by an airplane? And how BBC and Fox News and CNN all reported on its collapse before it actually happened. And then let them try and figure out how...
Highly reinforced and no explanation. And the silence, just, it's cognitive dissonance at the definition of cognitive dissonance right there. You said it.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Building 7, because it housed federal government offices, was built much stronger than the normal building codes for New York City. That should not have come down even from fires. And by the way, prior to 9/11 and since, no steel frame building has collapsed just from fire.
That's the most perfect. The Loazo brothers are jealous. Put it that way. But my other question is this.
If I recall correctly, the Loazo brothers got the contract for the cleanup.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Well, they must have got paid off.
I think that was the payoff.
Yeah, because you don't hear them talking about it, but every other demolition expert. Well, my question to you is this. It's so obvious that it's bone-chilling. It gives you goosebumps. But in this 28 pages of the 9/11 report that are redacted, my question to you is this. It's everybody that's looked at it. I know they're not allowed to read it, or they're not allowed to take pictures or anything, or take it with them or copy it. They have to have it. They all say it's Saudi Arabia. Why would I can't understand. I know that Israel did it. They were the lead dog in this thing with the neocons and the Saudis probably. But they have to. Is there no mention in that 28 redacted pages of Israel or?
Well, actually, my understanding is the original 28 pages did say Israel, but they've ginned up a second set of 28 pages, and they're trying to run a sucker game by getting everybody all hot and bothered. Show us the 28 pages, and then they say, okay, here you are. It was Saudi Arabia, and they sell us another lie. But again, Saudi Arabia doesn't need to crash airplanes into buildings to hurt the United States of America. They have billions and billions and billions of dollars. I'm starting to sound like Carl Sagan. Billions and billions of dollars invested in the American infrastructure. And all they have to do is ask for it all back. And the economic devastation would be complete. It would make the World Trade Towers look like a minor speed bump in comparison. And it would be perfectly legal for Saudi Arabia to yank its money back like that. They don't need to crash, and they don't have a motive to crash airplanes into buildings in New York City because of all the money they've got invested in the United States of America. They don't want it seized or confiscated. It doesn't make any sense Saudi Arabia did it. Remember, to find out if you're being lied to, look for what should be there and isn't. And what isn't there is a motive for Saudi Arabia to do this. Israel had a motive to do this and blame it on whoever they wanted to sick the U.S. invasion forces on. That's what's going on here.
They're going to turn Saudi Arabia into a parking lot. That gives them an excuse, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Israel wants Saudi Arabia gone because all of that money Saudi Arabia has invested in the U.S. gives them political power Israel cannot fight against. We have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the call, Mo. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we're going to go ahead and start grabbing some phone calls. We're going to start with George in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
All right, how you doing, Mike? The thing is, Ted Cruz coming out and making that remark blaming Donald Trump for the violence. Now his campaign is imploding. I mean, Chuck Norris withdrew his support from Ted Cruz.
Chuck Norris had never supported Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz just made that up, and Norris went public saying, no, I haven't backed anybody. I mean, Ted Cruz's lies are catching up with him.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, when Donald Trump called him a liar on a debate stage, he just vindicated himself. Ted Cruz has vindicated him.
Ted Cruz has vindicated Donald Trump. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, the thing is, hearing about forming militia for Donald Trump, I would have to say to the militia, if there's ever be a militia formed, beware of FBI COINTELPRO.
I don't think any real supporters of Donald Trump are forming a militia. This is another faked up group to make it look like Donald Trump is the author of the violence. And
the thing is, Trump does come president, the first thing I would do if I were him, I would go arrest George Soros and turn him over to the Russians who have a warrant out for his arrest.
I think that would be a very good thing to do, but first of all, let's grab all of his wealth with RICO lawsuits. I mean, Soros has been inciting riots in this country. And, there are grounds to seize him and his wealth and recycle it back into the American people. I hope Trump goes after Hillary Clinton. Of course, Trump is standing opposed to some of the most powerful people on the planet, which is why, we're all concerned about whether he's even going to be alive come November.
Well, I just followed Jeff Prince's advice. You have to stand behind bulletproof glass.
Well, that makes it look like he's afraid, and I don't think Trump wants to go there just yet. But by the way, as long as we're on the topic, did you see how fast the Secret Service moved to protect Donald Trump? And did you remember the attack on Reagan and how fast the Secret Service moved to protect him? Now go back and watch that video of the assassination of John F. Kennedy getting shot over and over and over again, and the Secret Service protective detail just standing there on that trailing car and doing nothing until it's all over. I'm going to make up a page about that because to me it's, and my hats are off to the Secret Service in Dayton, Ohio. They were doing their job the way they were trained to do it, just like they did it with the attack on Reagan. But when you look at that and you contrast it with the Secret Service in Dealey Plaza or the Secret Service surrounding George Bush on 9/11 down at that school in Florida, you begin to see very clearly when the Secret Service is doing their job and when they have been told to stand down.
Well, like I say, I would just put the Secret Service on the outer perimeter. Trump's higher security with the inner perimeter.
I think they are, but the Secret Service got up on that platform first. And I'm sure that, of course, to be very honest, I'm not sure if all those people on the platform were United States Secret Service or some of them may have been Trump's private people. They're kind of blended together. We should look into that and see who moved most quickly. If it turns out it's all Trump's private security who got up on there, then maybe the Secret Service was given a stand-down order. So that's a good question to look at.
Well, the thing is, I wouldn't trust the Secret Service more than I trust TSA.
Well, the Secret Service makes me nervous, and they're not as impressive as their media image. I remember, I think it was 3 years ago, Obama came out here for Christmas, and the Secret Service was checking Claire and I out. They literally showed up at where we were handing out food to the homeless and hungry at this local church, and the guy was just clearly wired way too tight for the context of the situation. So we made him carry all the heavy stuff.
Well, the thing is, Ronald Reagan came and spoke at my graduation commencement. You want to know what? There's Secret Service all over the place, but you want to know what? We moved freely and about, and the Secret Service did their job.
Well, Reagan really didn't have anybody who was after him other than potentially, George Herbert Walker Bush was trying to get an early promotion to that Oval Office. But other than that, Reagan was, a very, very popular president. Anyway, listen, George, I got to let you go. We got another caller waiting on the line I want to get to, so we're going to switch over here to Bob in New Jersey. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? Glad to keep up the good work. I just wanted to alert you, since that guy called in about Building 7, Richard Gage of Architects and Engineers for 911 Truth is running a webinar at his at the www.ae911truth.org/webinars. It's a 4-part webinar, and it will be recurring, so people can tune into that and get some of the information on why the government story of how the building came down is wrong.
Okay, well, I'm going to have to hunt that down. I mean, I'm very familiar with Richard Gage's website. Richard and I shared not only the stage but accommodations in New York for the 10th anniversary, which is a colorful story in and of itself. But I'll hunt down that webinar and I'll get that posted there because, all of you listening to this show, take it upon yourself to talk to your friends and family and ask them, were you aware there was a third building that came down into its own footprint, wasn't hit by an airplane, the government tried to pretend it wasn't there, and the corporate media reported the collapse, 20 minutes before it actually happened? And just show them that information. And I'm going to go ahead and put my own World Trade Center 7 page back up on this next commercial break.
Yep. Okay, Michael. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We'll try and find that webinar. We're going to switch over here to Andrew in New York. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Since a lot of people are calling Donald Trump to be assassinated, I told people that we're not going to believe the official story like we believed about Lee Harvey Oswald and Sir Alan Sirhan and like John Hinckley and all these people. We're not going to believe what the government tells us. Whatever.
Well, I think that may have been the reason for this guy to jump the barricade in Dayton, Ohio, was to sort of sell the idea that there are crazed nuts out there willing to take out Trump, to provide a cover story for the assassination. But, you know, again, it's fallen flat on its face. The guy's a professional actor, and he's got a long history of anti-American protests conveniently located in front of corporate media cameras.
I heard you in an interview with Brian Dawson, and you said that the mob helped JFK steal the election against Richard Nixon.
Yeah, the Richard Nixon certainly felt that Kennedy had stolen the election, and you have to remember John F. Kennedy's family was very heavily into organized crime. Old Joe Kennedy was a bootlegger. The Kennedy family fortune was created during Prohibition with alcohol smuggling, and they used the archdiocese of one of the Massachusetts cities to launder the money. And, of course, the way it works in the United States is you can have a criminal family, but as long as the children haven't committed any crimes or been caught in any crimes, they can still run for political office. And a lot of political dynasties were being built that way. And old Joe Kennedy built this immense family fortune, and after Prohibition was repealed, he wanted all of his sons to go into politics, and he aimed all three of them at the White House. He planned a 24-year Kennedy dynasty in the White House. John F. Kennedy, followed by Robert Kennedy, followed by Ted Kennedy.
My last question is, how did JFK Jr. die? Because like they said it was like his plane made to crash on purpose, and do you think Hillary Clinton was behind it because they were running for senator in New York?
Yeah, Robert Kennedy had just come, not Robert Kennedy, I'm sorry, John F. Kennedy Jr. I mean, all these Kennedys are falling like flies. It's tough to keep them sorted out. John F. Kennedy Jr. had announced that he was going to run for the same New York Senate seat that Hillary Clinton wanted. And amazingly enough, there was even a Newsweek article about it that was intercepted on the way to the newsstands and returned back to Newsweek to be destroyed, that carried the story about how John F. Kennedy Jr. was going to run for that Senate seat. It had already been announced in the New York area. And, yeah, the airplane fell out of the sky with John F. Kennedy Jr. and his wife. Yeah, it was a political hit. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And talk about desperation on the cusp of madness. We are now seeing an article where officials in North Carolina may charge Donald Trump with inciting a riot, even though we have organizations like Move On and Black Lives Matter claiming credit. I mean, this is incredibly absurd. That's like somebody, crashing a car into you and they charge you for the accident. That's exactly what's going on here. I mean, this is just absurd. But you know something? The more they do these absurd tactics, the more the American people wake up and realize just how crooked and corrupt our political system has become. And that's a good thing. Because at some point, the American people are going to get fed up and say, I owe these people no obedience. I owe them no allegiance. I owe them no loyalty. I owe them no money, no paperwork, and certainly not the lives of my children in their wars of conquest. Now, getting on over to Europe, we mentioned this earlier. Angela Merkel had regional elections in Germany. Her CDU party got hammered. They're probably feeling like a bunch of baby seals right now. And the issue on this election was the immigration coming into Germany and all the problems it has caused. And despite this humiliating defeat, Angela Merkel is out there vowing to stick to the open-door migration policy because this is larger than Germany. This is the New World Order, and you will follow the New World Order. And so Angela Merkel is basically telling the German people to go jump in a lake because what they want doesn't really matter. Of course, when the general election happens, Merkel is probably going to be out of a job. Now, Barack Obama announced that he is going to fly to Great Britain next month and go on a star-studded speaking tour all across Britain to tell the British voters, you have to stay in the European Union. And I would hope the British subjects would stand up and tell Barack Obama, it's none of his business. You have no business here telling us how to run our affairs, and you've got major problems in the United States that really is your job to be taken care of, like that water in Flint, Michigan, the radioactivity pouring out of Indian Point, Whips, Hanford, the aftermath of the Gulf oil disaster. Those are the president's correct and proper functions. And I'm not the only one who says so. Over at the Express, they have an article. He should stay out. Barack Obama warned against interfering in the Brexit debate. And another story over in the Daily Mail. Obama accused of hypocrisy because of how the United States won its independence, breaking free of the British Empire. So how dare you come on over and say that we should remain enslaved to the European Empire when the United States was created breaking free from an empire? And they're right. It is hypocrisy. But maybe that's the reason Common Core is trying to teach our kids that the founding fathers were all traitors to the British crown. And things are now getting a little bit worse. Call it the Drexit. Danish politicians are now saying they're going to have an independence referendum. Apparently there is now something like 30% of the Danes would vote to leave Brussels if the referendum was held tomorrow, and the trend is firmly up. So the EU may be falling apart, along with the dreams of global New World Order, glory, and the rest of it. Now, Chuck Schumer is out there screaming that a recent cyber attack on a small dam in the suburbs outside of New York City was a shot across the bow of the United States by Iran and should be met with tougher sanctions. Well, again, Schumer has absolutely no evidence who did the cyber attack. We all know that cyber criminals will route their bad behavior through networks of machines all over the globe. They don't know that Iran had anything to do with this, only that Iran is supposed to be the fall guy, which tells us that it's probably Israel that did this. And Schumer's on board. We've got more sanctions. See, the people who want war with Iran, they're very angry that the P5+1 deal went through. And they don't want it to stand. They want to sanction Iran to the point where Iran does something that they can say, see, Iran's the bad guy. We're going to take your sons and your daughters and your money, and we're going to go make war on those evil Iranians. Now, there's an article over in endoftheamericandream.com talking about the possibility of a real nuclear war with North Korea. The U.S. is over there with their military exercises, rattling their sabers. Kim Jong-un is playing brinksmanship, talking about their nuclear weapons. Is there a real possibility of an exchange? Yeah. I mean, from the point of view of the United States of America, they would probably welcome the chance to nuke North Korea, to remind the rest of the world that the U.S. government is the only government that's been psychotic enough to use nuclear weapons of mass destruction against other people. Nobody else has ever done it, other than the United States. And this would be an object lesson. Now, they're not going to get their war with China, nuking North Korea. China has already indicated they want nothing to do with this mess. It's all Kim Jong-un's fault. Same thing with Russia. The real open issue is, would somebody set off a nuclear bomb to blame on North Korea to get a war going? Don't forget, there's still an unaccounted for nuclear weapon floating around this country somewhere from that Minot Air Base incident a few years back. Hope they don't set it off here. Okay. China is very upset over arrangements being made between the United States and Australia to place long-range strategic bombers on Australian soil capable of reaching China. Everybody's getting ready to go to war. Of course, the people who want the war don't actually go to the war. That's what your children are for. That's what you're for. They're going to stay back home safe in their little bunkers, watch it all on TV, and toast themselves for their cleverness. Now, we've been talking about how Turkey's Erdogan, in cooperation with the U.S.-backed terrorist groups, has been stealing Syria's oil. It turns out Turkey is not the only one. Israel is already out shopping oil from the Golan Heights. handing out drilling contracts. There's a small problem with that. In the 1907 Hague Regulations, which is a cornerstone of modern international law, it says an occupying power must safeguard the capital of occupied properties. Stealing resources from an occupied territory constitutes the crime of pillage. Of course, Israel came on out and said, well, our occupation of the Golan Heights is unique, and we are not bound by laws against pillage, so we're going to go ahead and pillage. Once again, Israel is in defiance of international law. And if you point that out, they're going to scream at you that you are a dirty, filthy anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. Now, there's this Army Chief of Staff in Israel, Lieutenant General Gadi Eisenkot, who came on out saying that he doesn't want an Israeli soldier to empty a magazine on a girl with scissors. He's trying to rein in the out-of-control murder over there because it's making Israel look bad. It's building support for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And he's wise to do this. This is a good thing the general is doing, the chief of staff. But Israel's chief Sephardic rabbi, Yitzhak Yosef, is urging Israeli soldiers to ignore the army chief's orders and just kill any armed Palestinians they find. Yosef is arguing it's a religious imperative for all Jews to kill armed enemies and to be unconcerned with the rulings of the high court, the government, or their own officers. Now, Israel has responded with its own version of boycott, divestment, and sanctions. They are now blocking Palestinian products from export. Now, you can still get some Palestinian products, but they're basically, Israel is saying products from Israel are banned from entering Jerusalem through the Bitunia commercial crossing. We will make the world buy our products, and we will stop the world from buying your products. Which reminds me of this quote from Harry Truman. He was writing in his diary, and he wrote, "The Jews I find are very, very selfish. They care not how many Estonians, Latvians, Finns, Poles, Yugoslavs, or Greeks get murdered or mistreated as displaced persons, as long as the Jews get special treatment. Yet when they have power, physical, financial, or political, neither Hitler nor Stalin has anything on them for cruelty or mistreatment to the underdog." Harry Truman, 1947, in his private diaries. Now, this has been dismissed as an anti-Semitic hoax for year after year after year by Israel's supporters, but look at Israel's present behavior and tell me that President Harry Truman did not have a correct assessment at the time. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 877-300-7645. And a very good exercise, I've mentioned this before, but a really good exercise sometimes is to turn the sound off on your TV and just watch the politicians' faces while they talk and watch the faces of the audience, and it will tell you a great deal about what's going on. And I mention that because the We Hate Donald Trump network, formerly Fox News, was just showing Kasich making a speech up in Ohio and Hillary Clinton talking to somebody somewhere, and the faces on the people arrayed behind her and him were bland. They're just sitting there. They were asked to be there because they're part of some kind of a support organization. And if you look at the Donald Trump rallies, at the faces of the crowds, they are energized. They wanted to be there. They're thrilled to be there. These crowds behind the establishment candidates, they're just part of the set decoration. It's a very, very powerful tool. Turn the sound down, stop listening to the words, look at the faces, and that will tell you a huge amount of what you need to know about those candidates. Now then, interesting little story. This was a YouTube video we posted. A survivor of the Soviet Union who emigrated, came to the West, is now out there saying that the USA and Canada are exactly where the Soviet Union was in 1989, just before the collapse. Remember what I've been saying all along. There's a collapse coming. Sit back, watch the show. Don't give the government an excuse to declare martial law or a national emergency. They'll probably gin one up on their own anyway, but with nobody believing anything the government says, it's not going to work. The United States is a failed empire. It's hopelessly broken in debt. It's already mired in its existing wars. It is a joke to suggest that the U.S. could take on Russia and or China in a conventional war and prevail. They won't. We're going to lose this one, people, if we allow it to go forward, even if it goes nuclear, especially if it goes nuclear. But always remember, the bankers who are behind these wars, they don't care. Wars are the bankers' richest harvest of debt, and they don't care which side wins or loses. That's why you had Brown Brothers Harriman in New York City backing Hitler's rise to power. They made a huge amount of money off of him up until the war was officially declared and Roosevelt nailed them all under the Trading with the Enemies Act, partly as payback for their participation in the foiled coup d'etat against Roosevelt. Now, there's an article over in Investment Watch blog. Central banks have completely failed in their objectives. The European Central Bank's Draghi has played his last card to stave off deflation. It isn't working. We're going to see a crash. 2008 times 10 is on the horizon. Ron Paul is warning of a dollar collapse. Probably 100%. China and Russia are preparing for a bankrupted U.S. financial system. And the problem is, they can't fix it. Because the only way they could fix it would be to acknowledge the inherent instability in private central banking. In that, by design, it creates more debt than money with which to pay the debt until the debt crushes the system, and that's where we are right now. Story coming out of Before It's News. Bix Weir is reporting rumors that Deutsche Bank has already started suffering a derivatives implosion, and they're being kept from collapse because American financial groups, J.P. Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Citigroup, are buying those swaps back, knowing they're going to default. Now, remember last year, Congress changed the rules of banking to put derivatives back under the FDIC. In other words, when those derivatives implode, it won't be the banks who suffer. It'll be you, the taxpayers. It's just going to be added onto your tab, because the poor are always made to pay for all underneath fascism. We're going to grab ourselves a phone call here. Joe in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. I want to make a comment, and two of the things I would like to say is there's two documentaries on YouTube. One of them is called Invisible Ballots, and it's done by that guy that did The Creature from Jekyll Island.
Okay.
And the other documentary is called The Mormon Candidate, and it's a 5-part series. Some parts are on and some parts are blocked out by YouTube, but it's called The Mormon Candidate. And they address a couple of things regarding what's being discussed lately in the national news. And one of the things I thought was strange was the Marriott hotel chain where Mitt Romney is named after is the place where the Bilderberg groups are often held. The Bilderberg Group is over 95% of the meetings are held at a Marriott hotel. And I thought it was strange that during the 9/11 thing, Building 3 was demolished also when those towers came down, which was a Marriott hotel. And it just seems really strange that people increase the insurance a tremendous amount right before the buildings are destroyed.
Oh, Larry Silverstein, yeah, he bought a policy that specifically mentioned acts of terror, which at that time was considered a complete waste of money. I'm looking at YouTube right now, and I'm seeing a trailer for Invisible Ballots, but not for the full length itself. Okay, but I'll keep an eye out for that, all right?
Yeah, it's really well done. It explains how every election polling place must have one of the old machines that talk to Bev Harris often. And it keeps saying that the old machines must be in place at every polling station, and I don't know. I never see much discussed regarding it.
Well, the way they bypass that is the same way they bypass the absentee ballots. If the electronic machines deliver a wide enough margin to the person stealing the election, then they don't bother counting the absentee ballots, and they don't bother counting the ballots out of the old-fashioned machine because it's been declared arbitrarily. They couldn't possibly change the final outcome, therefore it's irrelevant. Until we get those electronic machines out of our elections completely, our elections will continue to be crookeder than a dog's hind leg.
Right. I do remember that they did have some invisible ballots or ballots that were so the military could vote while they're overseas fighting wars. And all of those ballots were on some planes, and the planes somehow caught fire on the runway, and everyone's ballots burned up so that they couldn't make it to the election.
Yeah, that kind of thing goes on a lot. The military, I remember during, I think it was 2008, there was a big stink about how, it was all the way back in 2000 with Bush and Gore down in Florida, where the military votes didn't arrive on time, and they were saying they weren't properly dated, and they were just going in there, throwing out the ballots of these people in uniform who were over there fighting the U.S. wars. But, we want you to go on out and do our wars, but we're not interested in your votes. The election system in the United States is an absolute disgrace. It really is. And to reiterate something I said earlier in the show, we're the nation who put men on the moon. You can't convince me that we are unable to devise an accurate, honest, fully verifiable election system. I don't believe that. If we don't have one, it's because those in power don't want one.
Yes, but when you constantly bring it up, it brings awareness, and each day a little bit more people wake up and a little bit more people wake up. And I also noticed that Romney was recently put back as the CEO or one of the people at the top of the Marriott hotel chain. He was put back on the board.
Okay, well, I think that's kind of irrelevant at this point. I think the issue is whether Romney can actually be put forward as a candidate in a brokered convention when he hasn't even gone through the primary and caucus process. We have to take a break for Sorry, Joe. Okay. Got to take a break for commercials. Commercials shall not wait. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And this is getting really obvious now. Apparently, Republican National Committeeman Curly Haugland of North Dakota has sent a letter to his fellow RNC officials arguing that current party rules allow all the delegates to the 2016 Republican National Convention to vote their own personal preference in that first round of voting. He's saying they are not under obligation to vote for whoever won the election in their state. He's basically saying the delegates can just do whatever they want. He's been a champion of protecting the rights of the delegates to vote their own conscience. Well, then what's the point of having primaries and caucuses if the delegates are not going to obey the will of the people? This is the Republican Party telling every Republican voters, go to the ballot, punch the button. It doesn't make any difference. We're going to choose who the candidate is. We could see the Republican Party literally destroy itself over this issue of Donald Trump. And that will leave the United States as a nation with a single political party in charge of the government. And anybody who studied the Soviet Union, which was a single political party government, knows what a terrible thing that will be. It is fully on display. The establishment is telling you, the American people, what you want doesn't matter. You're just here to give us money and breed us new workers and new soldiers, and that's it. Otherwise, shut up, sit down, or the terrorists will win. This is a slap in the face to everybody who has ever supported the Republican Party. And I imagine the Democrats are feeling exactly the same way, where the party leadership is saying, you don't count anymore. We demand your money and your loyalty, but you don't count. We know what's best for the party, even though what's best for the party may not be what's best for the nation and its people. We're seeing the death of the United States of America right before our eyes. Because what we've got now with the party leadership in Washington, D.C. was never intended under the Constitution. Our nation has been hijacked by greed, by foreign interests, This is shameful. This is absolutely shameful for the Republican Party to come on out and say that the delegates that we have all voted for don't have to vote the way we told them to. It's none of your business. All right, getting into the economic news. Physical gold demand is strong in emerging markets, limited supply leading to higher gold prices. We're starting to see places where the price of gold is starting to show gaps from one nation to the next. And I'm sure for people who could get across the borders, that's an opportunity for profit. But we know gold and silver and platinum prices are being held down in countries that are concerned about their citizens emptying their negative interest rate savings accounts and their stock portfolios and going into metals. They're very worried about that. Layoff warning notices have now been sent to 45,700 state of Connecticut workers. They're in serious financial trouble. Apparently, Congress is now considering allowing Puerto Rico to declare bankruptcy. So let's get on down here. Let's see, there we are. Freedom of speech to be denied by Attorney General Loretta Lynch. Now, Loretta Lynch is out there saying that whatever Hillary may have done with her insecure server and top secrets on it and all the already documented felony violations of Title 18, even if the FBI recommends charges, that she, Loretta Lynch, is just saying, I'm under no obligation to bring charges or indictments. It just doesn't rise to the level of a prosecutable offense. At the same time, Lynch has declared war on anybody who doubts the most wholly revealed dogma of human-caused global warming. In other words, Loretta Lynch wants to shred the Fourth and Fifth Amendments in order to be able to bring the full tyrannical force of the U.S. government down on anybody who questions human-caused global warming and the need for a new carbon tax, which is coming. Probably as soon as the general election is over, there's going to be a carbon tax to make up for the fact that Obamacare just didn't deliver the money they thought it was going to. Edward Snowden has come on out saying that this whole global warming nonsense actually dates back to the 1950s and was put out there by the Central Intelligence Agency to control funding and steer the scientific community away from the dangers of the nuclear arms race and focus them on the climate. Forget about the mushroom clouds. The money is in human-caused global warming. And, of course, the scientists are going to follow the funding. It's called the golden rule of science. Whoever has the gold decides the science. Meanwhile, apparently the Arctic Winter Games had to be delayed because of excess snow and ice. And this morning in Arkansas, major hailstorm just south of Little Rock. I saw the video of that. It looked like ice cubes coming down. Let's grab a phone call. Roseanne in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I just came across this this post on Facebook that says that there's this bill out there, HR 347 anti-protest bill, and I looked it up, and it's a felony to protest. Let's see, where does it say it? Of a building or grounds where the president or other person protected by the Secret Service is or will be temporarily visiting. So all those people that are protesting Trump rallies, they're committing felonies.
Well, H.R. 437 applies to politicians who are already in office. It doesn't apply to political candidates. And certainly, the same thing could be said about all those rioters in Chicago who shut Trump's rallies down. Would be in violation of that.
So even though it says other person protected by the Secret Service or temporary, so it's just for...
Well, it's obviously being selectively enforced. But this whole idea of free speech zones, that's become a real sore point for the American people, and that's why during the election year, we're not seeing that being used much. It was in previous election years. Here's your free speech zone, and it created such an outcry where this year they're saying, well, there's unofficial enforcement of free speech zones, but they're not being overt about it because that's reflecting very badly on the establishment. And the establishment's on the defensive right now. They're absolutely on the defensive. Anyway, listen.
Business as usual.
Yeah, business as usual. We got to let you go and take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And continuing on the subject of human-caused global warming, we have commented on how the handling of science, especially in this area, it's not confined to global warming, it's also in vaccines and GMO, has become sensationalistic, almost tabloid-esque in its handling, where in this age of agenda-driven science and bought and paid for science, somebody who's a researcher who says, I've discovered this odd phenomenon, it's probably not all that important, but it's interesting, they're not going to get media attention, they're probably not going to get any more funding. But if that same scientist says, I've discovered this interesting phenomenon and it's potentially the end of the world, then the media shows up, funding follows, and they proceed to move on forward here. And it's now built to the point where down in Australia, Australian academics have gone public saying that they are being forced to exaggerate or embellish the potential impacts of their research in order to secure funding for projects. The funding agencies are looking for sizzle. They're looking for something that can support the agenda. And it's just like the European witch hunts. There was a huge amount of money out there for people who would find and torture and burn the witches. And so everybody saw witches wherever they looked. The same thing is now true with human-caused global warming. Huge amount of funding to scientists who will prove human-caused global warming. And remember, individual scientists are just as corruptible as individual politicians or individual clergy. Just because somebody is a scientist is no reason to assume they are being truthful. The existence of scientific method is an acknowledgement up front that individual scientists make mistakes. They suffer from confirmation bias. They have agendas. They have people they need to please. And scientific method is a system by which we derive the truth from the clutter of all these conflicting scientific reports. And the first fundamental principle of scientific method is reproducibility. If you conduct an experiment and you get this result, I should be able to conduct exactly the same experiment and get exactly the same result. That confirms that we're dealing with something real and not somebody's wishful thinking or a lab mistake. But all along with the human-caused global warming, there's never been reproducibility. You ask for the raw data, oh, I'm sorry, we had to throw it away. We ran out of disk room. Just take our word for it. We have these expensively produced video graphics. Why aren't you just believing those? Last year, National Geographic actually ran an article about why people don't believe science anymore. Well, science is not supposed to be believed in. That's religion. That's politics. Science is supposed to be the exception. Science is supposed to be objective and analytical. And everybody looks at the raw data for themselves and comes to their own decision. But they don't want that anymore. They can't use clergy to convince you to do what the government wants anymore. That went out with the Renaissance, especially in the wake of all the child molestation scandals. So now the rulers will get somebody in a white laboratory coat to come on out and say, see, what the government is telling you is true, and you should believe them and do what you're told to do. And it's the same old scam. They just traded priest's robes for a white laboratory coat, and they're hoping you're going to go along. And generally, people are not. I mean, the human-caused global warming has been a disaster. Record-setting winter after record-setting winter after record-setting winter. This one was a little milder, but only because of the El Nino current washing up on the west coast of the North American continent, and that El Nino current comes from undersea volcanoes. So, getting on to computers, the battle between the FBI and Apple is continuing. And apparently the Department of Justice filed a response to Apple, which is denounced by Apple's lawyer as vitriolic smear. It doesn't even really address the issues. It's a legal brief that is just out there to castigate and impugn Apple and say that they're on the side of the criminals. And Apple is correct to fight this tooth and nail. Apple is out there warning that if the Department of Justice wins this fight, the FBI can force Apple to turn on the iPhone cameras and microphones whenever they want, spy on you, listen to you, anytime, without a warrant. That's what they want to do. Now, the Department of Justice is expanding its war on your privacy to the WhatsApp application because apparently it uses strong encryption, and that frustrates U.S. prosecutors, and we need to be able to peek into what you're saying to find the criminals and the terrorists. Real criminals and real terrorists already know not to use iPhones, Android, iPad, tablets in the first place. They know it's all backdoored. And if they do use it, they're using code phrases like they used in Paris, or they're developing their own encryption, which we proved can be done very easily. This attack on the Fourth Amendment is all about a government that is so terrified of you right now. They want to spy on everything that you're doing to make sure you're not thinking those double plus ungood thoughts about the government. And along the way, they're going to steal your business secrets for their own profit, which they were caught doing in Seattle at the APEC. And they're going to help themselves to naked pictures of your lovers for their own personal relaxation late at night, which Edward Snowden confirmed is happening. Now, we all know about PRISM, which is one of the government's many programs for spying on you in violation of the Fourth Amendment. And the official word up till now is, well, PRISM, it may exist, it may not, we're not sure. But apparently, in a recent lawsuit, a U.S. judge did admit in the court record the NSA's PRISM program is real. It is out there. And by the way, the latest word is the NSA is going to be allowed to share anything they find about you with your local police. Are they actually finding the criminals and terrorists? No, they're not. In fact, there's been a spike in the ransomware spam that's out there. There's a new one, Loki. Encrypts data on an infected machine and asks for a payment to get the decryption key. And the FBI's official response, if you are infected with ransomware, well, you might as well go ahead and pay it. We can't do a darn thing about it. We're too busy watching the law-abiding American people to make sure they stay loyal to the regime, as it were. Apparently, there's an Android banking Trojan that masquerades as a flash player, bypasses their security. I don't know about the rest of you, and I know we're being encouraged to use our smartphones as our electronic wallet as they push for the cashless society. I don't do that. I cash in my pocket. Hackers can't steal that. I don't have banking information on my iPhone, on my wife's Android, on the iPad. It's just not there. And that's what keeps us safe. The only time we've been the victim of cybercrime recently was a few years back when my wife had her credit card, which had an RFID chip, got scanned by somebody walking around the shopping mall, and all of a sudden we're buying tickets to sporting events over in New Jersey. And we specifically request chip-free cards from our credit card companies, and they've been very obliging up until lately. Now we're being told the chips will be mandatory from now on. But that's okay, because you'll spend more money getting one of those wallets with the RFID blocking in it. See, it's good for the economy. We're making you buy stuff. That's a wonderful thing. Okay, article coming out of the Register. Microsoft's done a terrible job with its Windows 10 nagware. And they're absolutely right. Now, I want to regale you in this last segment of today's show with the story about this laptop we got to support Claire's choir work down at her church. And it came with Windows 7 on there. And in order to give Windows 10 a fair trial, I allowed it to upgrade to Windows 10. And I tried to use it for a week. It is a complete unmitigated disaster. Then I reverted back to Windows 7. And I installed the GWX control panel to block further nags and attempts to force an upgrade. But the latest Microsoft patch to Windows 7, a total of 25 files, tried to reinstall Windows 10 again. More about Microsoft and how they're annoying everybody when we come back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about the wonderful worlds of computers and the blessings of Microsoft upon us all. And we're talking about this Windows 7 laptop that was donated to Claire's choir at her church. I'm her roadie and technician. And I sacrificed the machine for a trial for Windows 10. It was an absolute disaster. And so I exercised Microsoft's built-in revert feature to go back to Windows 7. Here's the problem. The reversion system is not working correctly for both Windows 7 and Windows 8. For just one example, the task management system gets totally hosed and is unrecoverable. Tasks aren't running. And for anything that relies on a task like Bluetooth, you can't get it to work. Nice job, Redmond. You are really impressing the heck out of all of us computer geeks. Now then, Windows 10 was supposed to revive the sales of new desktop PCs and laptops. Huzzah, huzzah, huzzah. Hasn't worked out. In fact, revulsion at Windows 10 has resulted in a serious decline in new computers. People are hanging on to their old computers. We went into Best Buy the other day because the local Radio Shack's gone out of business, and I was looking at some of the new computers they were selling, and the laptops, even the floor samples were starting to peel apart on those lids. And they were all Windows 10. And I was saying, can I get Windows 7? And they said, not here in the store. And then he leaned over and he said, but we can order you one with Windows 7. So they're selling Windows 7 machines out there. You just have to look for it. And a lot of people are really fed up with this arrogant attitude. Now we're hearing that Microsoft is considering going after the open source Linux distributions with the claim of patent infringements. Now, there's something you need to remember about patent law. It is there to protect the profits of people who invent something and sell it. It does not forbid you from recreating something for your own personal use. It's only a violation of the patent when you sell or otherwise transfer what you've built to a third party. But if you're writing your own code for your own use, it's not a patent infringement. Microsoft wants Linux to go away. They don't want you to have a choice. You will have your Windows 10 and you will like it. And Windows 10 is all about more intrusion into your private life. Windows 10 is about forcing you into the rental mode of software, where you will pay for your software continuously, month to month to month to month, which means that the software companies have no more incentive to develop newer and better product. They'll just sell you the same thing over and over again through all the coming years, including all the problems. Last week we were reporting where apparently Windows 10 is now arbitrarily on its own deleting certain programs Microsoft feels you should not be allowed to have, like CCleaner, which is a very popular free system tune-up utility. But Microsoft doesn't like it, and Microsoft has decided they are going to take it off your machine. Their attitude is, you are too stupid to understand what's going on in the computer. Just trust us. We know what's best for you. Now, Apple had that attitude with their computers all along. Apple's computers are basically marketed as appliances for consumers who are not into computers. And it worked because Apple and Macintosh came out with a good system. But Windows 10 is just more of the same crud we've always gotten from Microsoft. And they're trying to force it on us. They want to force the rental model of software. And I think it's a huge mistake. It's going to drive more people to Linux. And I'll give you a good reason why that's not a good model. I used to work in the fields of computer animation and visual effects. And it's a very hot and cold business. Sometimes you will have more work than you know what to do with. Other times you can go for a month or two or even longer without any project coming on in. And under the old model of I buy a license for my software when the business is not happening, I just turn everything off and I go fishing or surfing or something. And then when the new project comes in, I come back in and I turn everything on and I go back to work. But if you're on a rental process with your software and you hit a dry spell, and you can't make the rental payments and all your software shuts down, you are over and done with. Even if a new project comes in, you are dead in the water. You can't do that. This is going to cause far more harm to the U.S. economy. Anyway, Vladimir Putin is out there. He's issued orders that the Russian people must be protected from GMO food and Western pharmaceuticals at all costs. He's gone as far as saying human evolution is under threat by Western big pharma, GMO and vaccines, and he's absolutely correct. Apparently last Friday, a Thurston County Superior Court judge ruled that the Grocery Manufacturers Association violated Washington campaign finance disclosure laws by shielding the identities of major corporate donors funding efforts to defeat a food labeling initiative in Washington. Now, in 2013, the top 10 contributors to the Grocery Manufacturers Association Defensive Brands account, Ban GMO Labeling account, were PepsiCo to the tune of $2.6 million, Nestle $1.7 million, Coca-Cola $1.7 million, General Mills $996,000, ConAgra $949,000, Campbell Soup $441,000, Hershey Company $413,000, J.M. Smucker $401,000, Kellogg $369,000, Land O'Lakes $332,000. Remember when the big argument against GMO labeling was how much it was going to cost these poor corporations to change the labels on their bottles, and yet look how much money they're spending to stop this. If they thought GMO was beneficial and healthy, it would be all over the labels. We have more GMO than the other guy's product. They know it's a problem. They know the American people don't want GMO. They're going to sell it to you because nobody else around the world will buy it. They're trying to have provisions in the TPP and TTIP to force other countries to buy our GMO. They don't want it. It's very dangerous technology. And if they can't sell it overseas, they're just going to force you to buy it, and that's why they're out there with this bill to ban GMO labeling, into which they're pouring millions and millions of dollars under the excuse that it would cost them too much to change the labels on their products. Now, if you shop on a regular basis, you know the labels get changed all the time. Latest marketing gag, latest celebrity endorsement. Changing the labels on a product isn't that big a deal. But that's their excuse. The FDA has apparently decided to reclassify electroshock therapy as low-risk recommended treatment for depression. They're bringing back shock treatments. Now, the reason shock treatments were banned is they were shown to cause permanent damage. But by golly, this will work and we can charge money for it and it only costs us an electric bill. So they're bringing back the electroconvulsive therapy devices. And of course, they're going to start declaring that anybody who doubts the official story of anything is obviously depressed and needs to have electroshock therapy. They're going to start torturing us into believing the official government story about whatever. Apparently, Prilosec and Prevacid are found to raise the risk of dementia by 50%. It's amazing. Splenda is now tied in with some horrible diseases. Apparently, a French man died last month and 5 others in a clinical trial were hospitalized after they took an experimental drug. The drug had been deemed safe for humans because it worked just fine on chimpanzees without adverse effects. Well, chimpanzees aren't humans. They're close, but they're not there. And just because it works on a chimpanzee doesn't mean it works on human beings. Apparently, Jessica Alba's Honest Company, that she built on her status as a film star, turned out it's peddling the exact same toxic laundry detergent chemical used in Tide and other brands. It turns out Alba's company didn't even test their own products. They just took it on faith that these were organic, natural, toxin-free chemicals. And they made a lot of money. Apparently, it's the company's valuation is right through the roof, $1.7 billion. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, here on the Genesis Communication System. Until then, stay safe, stay informed. Go on out, tell everybody about Building 7. Tell them how all these riots against Trump are bought and paid for with hiring actors in Craigslist. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.